This week's Parsha is Parsha Vayera, which is the 14th Parsha in the Torah, and also the second Parsha, or the second Torah portion in the book of Shemot. And in this week's Parsha, there is so much going on. But what I would like to focus on is that we have the first 7 of 10 plagues happen in this week's Parsha. And there were 10 plagues inflicted upon the Egyptian people, and we see 7 of them in this week's Parsha. And I'm going to tell you first what they are, and then I will get into the point. Now, the first 7 plagues are, we have blood, which was where the Nile, which was really important for Egyptian agriculture, and it was really a resource where Egyptians made money, and obviously the water provided them their water source, so it kept them alive. So the water all turned into blood. Not the Jewish people's water, only the Egyptians' water. So the water all turns to blood. Now, the second plague we have is frogs. With the plague of frogs, all of the frogs that are living in the Nile leave the Nile. They scatter across the land. There's an infestation of frogs, and they're really a disturbance to the people. The third plague is lice. So now we have lice everywhere. All people are scratching and itching everywhere. It's very uncomfortable and very unpleasant. The fourth plague we have is wild animals, and these are sort of the animals are going stir crazy, and they're really harming the people, attacking the people. The next plague we have is the death of these animals, where all of the livestock are dying all across the land. Again, only the Egyptians' livestock. We have after that boils, which is where people are getting these lesions all over their skin. It's very uncomfortable again. And then we have the 7th, which is fiery hail, where fire and ice are combining working together to create hail that's falling from the sky and causing, again, a lot of discomfort to the people. And what's very interesting to me when you look at them, the plagues, is that there is a scientific explanation for the plagues. When you look at the plague of blood, scientists say that really it was red tide, or a sort of algae that was toxic that turned the water red, and the red water, which again was toxic, caused all of the frogs to leave because they wouldn't be able to survive in the toxic environment. So all of the frogs get out of the water, but it's kind of too late for them, so all of the frogs die. Now, the death of the frogs leads to the right environmental conditions for lice. So now there are insects all over the land. These insects are on the animals, which makes them really acting wild because the animals are uncomfortable, and so the animals sort of become vicious. Then we have the death of the animals, again, sort of the algae or the insects, whatever it happens to be, but it seems to be that the toxins in the water would have caused the livestock to die because that was their source of water. Then you have boils, which scientists suggest would be an outbreak of smallpox, and again, causing a lot of discomfort. And then you have fiery hail, which scientists explain would be due to a volcanic eruption that happened around the same time that might have caused ash to go up in the weather system and come down with the hail. So scientists have found a way to explain each and every one of the plagues as happening in a logical sort of sequential order that made sense, that one thing led to the next. And yes, it does make sense logically when scientists explain it that way. And that's something interesting about the way that Hashem works. Hashem works in such a way that what he does, not just in regards to the plagues, but in our daily lives, could be explained by science or by coincidence, or we could see Hashem's plan guiding each of these events to happening. So the people who didn't want to believe in Hashem with the plagues, they could explain them by science. Scientifically, it makes sense that if there's toxins in the water, then the frogs are going to leave, then they're going to die, and so on and so forth. Or you could say, wow, like Hashem had a plan in causing each one of these things to happen, that one thing led to the next, and each plague had to happen for a reason, in order so certain events would occur. And we could say the same things in our own lives. Let's say, for example, you're looking for a job as a lawyer. You don't have a job, and you run into an old friend that maybe you haven't seen since high school, and it turns out she works for a law firm, and they have an opening position, and then you get that job. You apply and you get that job, and now you're working together. So you could say, wow, what a coincidence that we ran into each other because I needed the job and she had a job opening. And yes, that's perfectly plausible. It's perfectly plausible that you would just happen to run into somebody because let's say you shop at the same supermarket, and then she would have a job opening and you would be in need of a job. Or you could say, wow, like Hashem works in these incredible ways that just when I need a job, I'm going to run into somebody who I haven't seen in years, and she's just going to happen to have a job opening for the exact type of position I'm looking for, and they hire me. You could look at that and say, well, like, wow, thank you, Hashem, for leading one event to lead to the next event, to lead to the next event, until this conclusion that is for good. So we have a choice as people where we can explain things by science or by coincidence, or we can look at sort of the wondrous, intricate plan that Hashem has created, and we can decide which one we're going to believe in, which one we're going to follow. And it's not to say that the science isn't correct, because again, Hashem sort of causes science to happen too, but we have to see that Hashem had a plan, and Hashem's hand played a role in each one of these events so that they would happen in the way they were meant to. So I hope each one of us can look at these sort of coincidences in our life and see that each one of them had to happen to lead to a certain grand event that was for a good purpose. I hope each one of you has a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom.